Hello and welcome to today's session. It's good to be with you. I know we have a small group. Stuart, I see you there. That's fine. We're going to continue on with our session today, and we're going to record it. So those who cannot be with us today at this hour will be able to watch. But we are here to talk about a really important subject. So I'll go back to that. Today, we're going to be talking about design elements in Tableau and other visualization platforms. In this session is really important because it talks less so about the technical aspects of Tableau per se or visualization platforms, but how we communicate stories by using these platforms, by thinking about things like design elements and color. And I know that a lot of us come to visualization from different angles. Some of us come from a technical angle. So we do work in development and programming. Some of us come at visualization from more of a data angle that are focused on issues of data management, data gathering. And then some of us approach visualization from the perspective of design. So how do we communicate our story? How do we communicate ideas? How do we communicate data to broad audiences? And how do we make those pieces cohesive and clear and impactful, right? And so there are sort of those three different groups of individuals. And obviously, a lot of us try to be all three, right? We try to be both technical, data-oriented, as well as design-oriented. And so today's session is going to really focus on the design-oriented pieces, right? And we're going to be using Tableau today, but we're also going to be looking at some other platforms such as Infogram that are also used at bridging the gap, perhaps, between some of the data and the technical side with thinking about how we share this information with broader audiences and think about design elements. And so let's launch into today's session. And the place that I want to start today in today's session, which is looking at some examples from Tableau. And when we're thinking about design elements, oftentimes we want to look at what other people have been doing, right? That gives us inspiration, that gives us ideas for things that we may want to incorporate. We also see some current trends in visualization dashboards, because if we look over time at the design elements of dashboards, they have evolved over time. They don't look the same way they did, say, 5 years ago when we're working in Tableau, Power BI, or any of these platforms. Things have sort of evolved over time. They become more complex. Design elements that have been incorporated have become more intense and more important, particularly as we've seen professionalization creep in the design element. So let's start looking at some examples here just to get us started to think about design elements. So let me share my screen here. I'm going to share 3 examples here from Tableau. And they're going to be coming from very, very diverse subjects here. Let me just change a couple things with the camera so that everyone can see me. Here we go. All right, so let's take a look at this one right here. This one is a visualization that's thinking about issues of poaching rhinos in South Africa, and specifically in their largest wildlife reserve and national park, which is Kruger National Park, right? So you can see Kruger National Park right here. So let me take the annotation tool here. Right, so if you see right here, you can see this is Kruger National Park. So there's a bit of a map incorporated here. There's also right here a figure here that looks at the number of rhinos poached in a given year. So we're all the way up to 2018. So 789, in case we're interested, have been poached in 2018. And that goes all the way down to a lot lower level in 2006. So one of the key points here is that there's been an increase in poaching that has happened over time here. And then we also have here the rhino here, the image of a rhino that's here in silhouette form. So it's kind of black and white version of the rhino here. And also an interesting button here that they've included, a button element here that says click to poach. So let's click that button. And there we see the rhino's tusk goes off here. And it can't be undone. Once the damage is done, it can't be undone. So you can see this person who designed this visualization is also having a message here that you want to go back to see the rhino with the tusk there. You can't go back to see the horn on the rhino after clicking the button. So you have a little bit of animation that's built into this visualization as well. The other thing to pay attention to here is the colors, right? The colors here are quite important. We have a black background here, or near black background, white text, which is often good for readability here. But we also have this color of red here, which red is oftentimes a color associated with a menacing sort of view. So if we're thinking about issues of death or harm or concern, we're oftentimes thinking about, you know, a color of red. In this case, it's not a bright red. So notice that it's an off red, right? And the reason why we're using an off red here is because red is really in your face. It's really hard for us sometimes to view. It's hard on the eyes. So this example here of poaching rhinos in South Africa is using a reddish color, but not that red color that's going to hurt our eyes or overly alarm our eyes, for example, right? So again, a lot of design elements, but it's simple. It's very simple. It's just displaying really one form of data here, which is the poaching of rhinos in South Africa. That's the data form, and then we got a map. But the map really isn't telling us much, but it's adding at least context to where that's taking place, right? So you can see this is a really simple visualization, but it's using a lot of different design elements to communicate to us a number of different things about this problem of poaching. All right, let's take a look at another one. So I'm going to move here to this one. All right, how's Africa doing, right? And you can see here, this one does not use text, but if you hover over here, I'm going to put this in the chat so everyone can see these visualizations and play around with them. So let me put this one here in the chat here. So if you look at this one right here, this how's Africa doing? As opposed to putting text on here, the designer decided to add a pop-up, which would provide the text, right? And there's a lot of reasons why we may want to do that, because one of the things that oftentimes you see in Tableau dashboards these days is a lot of text. And when you're going to a visualization, the thing that should be front and center in your visualization is actually the visualization of the data itself, right? You want to have, in many ways, minimal text, right? And one of the things that we see among certain people who use visualizations is they use a lot of text, right? In particular, if you're a professor, if you're a researcher, you're an academic. Generally, what we find when we mentor academics, researchers, is they put a lot of text on their visualization, right? Because they're used to writing articles. They're used to using text in a large form. So they put a lot of text on their visualization, right? But we don't want to use a lot of text. It's really hard, particularly as we're going to see today, text that spans a visualization, text that's going way across. Notice if you go to blog posts online, how text is really narrow. Right. So if you go to the New York Times or other reputable sources, the BBC or other places like this, Ghana Web. I'm not to say that Ghana Web is a reputable source, but it is a source that is out there. One of the things you'll notice about those blog posts when you view them is they're very narrow. And the reason why they're very narrow is our eyes do not like to scan an entire screen. Right? You may not think about this, but if I put text across an entire screen, your eyes would get tired and you jump from that page. You say, I don't want to look at that, right? There's something that is kind of uneasy to me in that, right? So we want to have as few text as possible. And if we are using text, as we're going to see, we want to make it as narrow as possible, because that's going to be really nice on the eye. It's going to simplify. It's going to make it more legible to us. But this author right here in this example has said, I'm not going to include any real text here. I'm going to only include text if you're interested in seeing it, right? So you have to hover around this right here, this question mark, how's Africa doing, right? And according to the UNICEF in 2015, 844 million people in the world lack basic water services. And among them, almost 159 million people, right? And then you can see another piece here, which is there are links here in addition to that to these different sources that are highlighting it. So we have some linking going on here. Again, we're pointing out some of the key design aspects here. Let's look around here as well. And a couple things to notice here is that we have a little country boxes here. And we have a color key. So its color key is demonstrating a few things, right? We have different levels of water, right? And so some of us that are familiar with digging boreholes or dealing with issues of water management, we know that we get our water from different levels, right? So we have the surface water on the top, right? And so that's denoted by this orange. Then we have the improved water source just below. We have improved water source that is below, and then we have an improved water source, right? So you're starting with sort of the surface at the beginning, and then we have these other water sources as well. And if you know a lot about, getting water, you notice that you want to tap down lower. So it's also feeding on this idea of layered water sources, right? So if we're digging a borehole, we want to make sure that we dig that borehole into that underwater aquifers that are going to be able to pull up the highest quality water. So we also have this layering effect. So again, this is intentional, right? The key thing about all of this is you may say, well, they just kind of put them in this order, but they're thinking intentionally here. They're also sort of thinking intentionally about the colors here, right? Notice improved water source here is in blue. Here you can see the blue colors here around here that are symbolizing this sort of water theme. And you also see blue here in the little icon here. So you see the icons of the different water sources are in blue, and we're thinking about water, right? We're being intentional about that color. It's not a dark blue. It's not a blue that's in your face. It's a really sort of lightened blue, right? It's a little bit of a muted blue. So it really comes out and is soft on the eyes here, right? And it's really simple. It's just one piece here, and then you can filter it with some beautiful filters here if you'd like to look at, the distribution of these different water forms, whether it be in urban areas, rural areas, and so on and so forth, or if it's in drinking water and sanitation, right? And for all of us who know that water is going to become, and is presently in many contexts, a very scarce resource, we can see that this is really important here. Right. And so change his color on the sanitation front, because we're thinking more about the drinking water here versus, in this case, sanitation. So we're changing the colors to denote we're looking at something different. In this case, we're looking at greens, yellows, oranges, and a muted sort of red-orange here. Right. So notice that color change. We're looking at sort of a different category here, denoting different categories. Again, a lot of things are going on here. If we're looking at a visualization, and if, again, coming back to what I said at the beginning, if we're just sort of a data person or we're just a development person, then we may be missing some of these design elements when we're thinking about our dashboards, right? When we're creating that, because like it or not, people do care about our dashboards having that finished polish to them, right? Thinking about these design elements. Let's look at one more example here before we get into thinking about how we organize and plan our design principles here. And this one comes from a dashboard here that's looking at armed conflict in Africa. So we're thinking about, civil conflict, political violence, things of that nature, right? And again, we come back to that rhino example. We started with the black background in the muted red. We have sort of a darkish color theme here that comes out here. Not a black color, except on the map right here, but sort of a, we could call this sort of say a dark gray form of color. They're all sort of diminished forms of one color or not. So we see that, and we see a yellow color, and we see an orange color. So yellow and this orange, although not red, is gonna indicate some sort of alarm or conflict, right? So we're thinking about that. We see down here a couple of things. We see on this side, we see a bar graph here, sorted. And then this one is not sorted, right? Because we're sorting this whole visualization based on the incidences here, right? And so a couple other things that you're noticing about this visualization is right here. You see a touch button right here that is sort of indicating that you can touch this, right? And I think this is another design element that people oftentimes forget when they're building their dashboards, is that when we look at a dashboard, not everyone knows what is able to be clickable, right? So if we look right here at this visualization, just go back for a second. How many of you would know that to view the text, we would have to hover over the exclamation mark that is right here? Not so many of us, right? We would have to we'd be looking around, sort of scanning with our cursor, and then, oh, there's text there, right? And that happens on a lot of visualizations. A lot of people come to a visualization and they miss a lot because we're not even indicating where there's sort of added information by using symbols. This person's saying, hey, play with me, touch me, right? See what's there, right? And we can see the actual incidences here in the tooltips here. And then right here, more explicitly, we've got drop downs, right? So this allows us to sort what type of civil conflict or armed conflict are we looking at? Is it a battle? Is it a riot? Is it protest? And this comes from an ACLID data source. It's a conflict data source that is common. Let me reload it here. It's a conflict data source that is there. And then we have region here. So we can sort by region. So if we want to take off all here, it should sort right here. If it's still working, sometimes our visualizations will work. So let's look at East Africa here. And there we go. We are now able to just focus in on East Africa. We got this great element, which helps us simplify what is otherwise quite a lot of data here. And you can see all the points here. And we see a figure here that looks at incidences versus fatalities. So our author's trying to draw us to our attention to the issue that all incidences don't lead to people dying in civil conflict, although many do, right? So you see, this one's a very simple one. We've got a map. We've got a map here, a very, very simple map. We got dark colors and sort of this orange and reddish color that's symbolizing some sort of, conflict or concern, right? It has that feel to it, right? It doesn't have that overly positive, uplifting sort of form to this visualization, right? So these are some key things. Again, we can see a lot of things. And if we had a larger sort of discussion about this, we'd even point out some more things that the author is doing about the fonts and about how things are arranged that are also going to be indicating various design elements here, right? So we want to be thinking design focused when we're in today's session, because that's what we're looking at. So let me go to the PowerPoint here. We're going to get in here. So we've looked at these three. So let's think about how we deconstruct and plan for some of these really nice visualizations. And then we're going to talk about how we actually carry out some of these design elements and think about how we compose these together. So we're going to get into Tableau in the second part after we sort of discuss the planning elements. So let's think about some key questions that we have to ask before we do any visualization. And the first question we want to really ask with our visualization is, what are we seeking to accomplish with this? Right? It's oftentimes in the back of our minds when we're designing a visualization, but oftentimes when we're designing a visualization, we're working in teams, and we have to have that discussion as a team about what we're trying to impact with a visualization. And many of us who are coming to the conference, we have different fields or different interests or different things we're thinking about for, what we're trying to impact, right? Some of us are trying to impact social economic concerns in our given context, right? Leaders of Africa and our institute that is putting on today's session that I'm the director of, we are thinking about social impacts in technology, multimedia development, and as well as data analytics, right? And so ours is very much thinking about social impact. But some of us are coming at this in the angle of being in a for-profit company or for-profit entity. And we're thinking about impact in terms of achieving and gaining customers or achieving and gaining market share, right? That could also be something you maybe want to be able to achieve, or it could be a more internal goal. We're trying to achieve, for example, something within our organization, right? So strategic planning within our organization or company, right? We're all going to have different purposes within our organizations that we generally use. And then within each visualization, there are going to be different purposes that you're going to have for your visualization that you're going to be using for a particular visualization, right? So that's the first question we want to always ask. And again, we oftentimes ask that in the back of our minds, but we don't always explicitly discuss that all the time, right? So that's the first thing. What do we hope to achieve? So the second thing we want to think about is, who is the audience, or, and I have to emphasize this, audiences, right? We have oftentimes audiences in mind, right? For Leaders of Africa's Institute, we're really focused on mid-career professionals, researchers, as well as faculty member at major universities across the African continent, right? And so those are different audiences, right? A mid-career professional is not in higher education, but they may be in government or in research, right? Then we have faculty members, professors, for example, such as myself, that are looking for something, right? And then we have even institutions themselves, like University of Ghana, or University of Boya, University of Cape Coast, right? The list can go on, right? So we oftentimes have an audience in mind, but we oftentimes also have audiences. And the issue that we face when we have audiences is that we have to make sure that our visualization is going to speak to those audiences and some of the things that they want to see and the design elements that they're going to be expecting in our visualization, right? So audience is really key, right? And those audiences, for the rhinoceros example that I shared, the water example that I shared before, they're going to have different, and the last one on conflict, they're going to have very different audiences that are maybe interested in them, right? And they're speaking to some of the common motifs and imagery that those audiences would expect, right? Second thing is audience. And before I get to the last question here, I want to make sure that we're engaging in the chat here. I know we're very few in our session today, which is great. That gives us the opportunity to kind of interact here. But I want to also hear from you what you in general, when you're creating visualization, what is your goals for achieving? What are your goals that you hope to achieve in visualization? Who are some of the audiences that you reach? So I'm going to call on you to share. So be prepared to share. So we have a small group here so we can all share. So be prepared to share as I'm thinking, as I explain the last question, which is, what are you trying to tell the audience? And the second question is, what are you trying to get the audience to do? Because many of us are actually trying to get our audiences to do something with our visualization, right? So we're trying to get them to, for example, in the rhinoceros example, stop poaching, or to give money to anti-poaching organizations, or to be an advocate against poaching of rhinoceroses. And I'll flip back to that example for those of us that joined just a little bit late. That was this example right here, right? So they're obviously trying to get us to think about this issue of poaching and how we can get involved in stopping the poaching, given that it has expanded significantly since the early 2000s, right? And there are a lot of reasons for that, right? The other folks who are looking at water may be thinking about what we're doing with conservation of water, what we're doing with achieving access to water, right? And this visualization may be getting us to think about conflict, its distribution, where we should be doing conflict prevention exercises, right? Where our efforts should be tailored to if we're thinking about conflict and limiting any forms of armed conflict as well as other forms of conflict, right? So again, we all have sort of an audience, we all have an purpose and a thing that we're trying to do with our visualization. So I want to go around the room today, and we're going to kind of go down the list. I'm going to start with you, Amos, and then I'm going to come to you, Linda, and then Mobile Web Ghana, which is there. I obviously, there's a face behind the Mobile Web Ghana name, and then to you, Stuart. We want to hear from you, like, what are you hoping to achieve with your average visualization, or a visualization perhaps you're working on now, or have worked on, or are planning to work on? What are your audiences? And perhaps you can tell us a little bit about how you've identified those audience. And then finally, what are you trying to tell that audience, right? And I'm going to use some of your examples in the context of when we discuss these design elements, what you may be thinking about doing from a design perspective. So Amos, are you willing to unmute yourself and share?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear, loud and clear.
Okay. So with me, I am more into digital marketing, and I mind social media comments. So my audience are businesses. They are my audiences, and I want them to understand and appreciate what their customers are saying online.
Great. Right. So this is a great one. So we're using on our main data source is comments online on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, right? So you're pulling in that data and making sense of it, and then shuttling that to businesses that are considering making decisions or brand decisions on the basis of that social information. That right? Have I captured it correctly?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, let me ask you one question, Amos, before we move on to Linda. So how do you capture those comments on social media? Do you scrape them from online? Are you using textual analysis tools to determine some of the common themes? How are you sort of bringing that data out from the sources of social media? I'm curious to know, because it's also a key component we may want to think about how we display that in design form.
Okay, so I scrape them online using tools to scrape them online. Then I use semantic tools to make the analysis. Yes, so I leverage on monkey learning for sentiment analysis.
Okay.
And some other tools to get insights in the reviews.
Great, wonderful. Wonderful. Excellent. That's great. That's a great set of techniques. See, and that's one of the things that you want to think about when you're doing the design element, is making sure it's really clear in your visualization that your process of taking that social information and then imparting it in these more analytical ways through sentiment analysis, topic modeling, thematic modeling, things of that nature. Wonderful. Great. So that's a great set of goals, audiences, and then trying to think about how those will be used, right? Great. Thanks for sharing. Linda, why don't you share, please? If you can, if your microphone is working and you're able to hear us.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, Linda, we can hear you well.
Okay, great to be part of this session. So to answer your first question, what do I hope to achieve with visualization? So basically, I want to look at telling stories or being able to communicate achievements through my work. So I work at Mobile Web Ghana as the communications and fundraising officer, and I believe that being able to tell stories on impact and how people are being transformed through our projects is very key. So I think that that's something I really want to hammer on. Anytime there's an opportunity to share with our stakeholders and those who are beneficiaries, as well.
Great, excellent. And what do you hope to get them to do? with hearing the stories, and also sort of sharing those accomplishments? What are you hoping them to do after viewing your visualization or interacting with it?
Okay, so I'm hoping that through their interaction or engagement with whatever content they engage with, they will be able to also share with us, and through that, like, we'll be able to get referrals and also expand our network. So it's like our voices, they'll be able to help us to propagate the stories within their communities as well, because even as they see their stories being captured through what we do, I believe that we're able to have a sense of belonging and identity as well.
Great. Excellent. So in a sense, a bit of networking, a bit of community building, a bit of exposure of what you're doing to people who may be aware of what you're doing, but also may not be aware of what Mobile Web Ghana does. And also, maybe I can add another one, Linda, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but also you're interested in gaining projects, and also it's about, achieving grants, right? Because one of the things that we want to show when we're, making an impact is how what we're doing is meaningful. Our programs are well designed, and people will invest in them and support them. Is that right? Would that be another audience, another purpose as well?
Yes, certainly.
Wonderful. Great. All right. So great. So Linda, you're sharing more of a sort of a nonprofit, set of motivations, whereas Amos is more of sort of the business side of things. Great. We also have, thanks Linda for sharing. All right. We also have Mobile Web Ghana. And if it was yesterday, then that may be Florence. But why don't you share your name as well?
Yes, my name is Florence Tusa. And yes, so we do a lot of impact projects that will in the sec. And sometimes want the right medium to share our impact and get visibility for the work that we do for our partners as well as for people who invest their resources into our organization. And so one of the ways we do that is to report sometimes through online information about the various activities we've carried out. So what we hope to achieve with the visualization is number one, get visibility, and number two, be able to express ourselves in a way that is easily understandable by our audience. Who our audience is like for our partners, our sponsors, as well as the youth that we normally target in our capacity building program. What we are trying to tell the audience is that we have very innovative, approach to we have a team that can deliver. And we are trying to get the audience to subscribe or to support us, subscribe to our capacity building programs, and also our partners to be able to also invest more into our initiatives. So those are the core and key things that we are looking forward to doing with our infographics and visualizations.
Yeah, absolutely. So Florence, that's really good that you've emphasized there, really interacting with, you emphasized, whereas Linda was emphasizing sort of the telling the stories, the networking and the community building aspect. You brought in the other part, which is, dealing with sponsors and partners, right? And telling those stories, as well as, and I think this is a good one, showing the impact of one's programs to make sure that you're getting a lot of people participating in programs, because that's one of the difficult things that a lot of organizations face, is ensuring when they put on programs that people attend them, that they're targeted to the people that we want them to be targeted to, and that we're able to sort of demonstrate that impact. Yeah, absolutely. And Stuart, why don't you share it? Because for the sake of time, we're going to keep things short here. So Stuart, why don't you share?
Sure, I'll be quite quick then. What I'm actually working on my other screen while you're presenting is a usage dashboard.
Okay.
Where I'm trying to identify the active users versus inactive users, and I've got quite a few different audiences for this. So primarily, it's for the funders, so that I can show them that what we have built is actually being used. And then also to the clients, so that the client can actually improve usage. And then also for myself, so I can identify the views / dashboards that are not being utilized correctly. Is it from my side? Have I not met the criteria that the clients wanted? And yes, so that's basically what I'm working on right now.
And what are some of you said active users and inactive users? What are they using? What's one example of something that they be using that you're monitoring the usage of?
Okay, so we use mobile applications to give to all the clinics in South Africa, and they basically tell us how much stock they have of their critical medicines in South Africa, and then we send them stock. So it's basically if they're using the application correctly.
Okay, great. Right. So mobile usage. And is the audience more internal for your organization to sort of monitor that? Or is it, you also said that it's shared with the clients as well, so to have conversations about the usage of the app. Is that right? So there's that second part to it as well?
Yeah, so there's 3 parts. So I'm sending it to the same visualization. I've got 3 audiences. So I want to be very open with the funder to show them that, listen, it's not 100% being used by everyone. But so I'm going to show them that. At the same time, they can go to a different level where they can see at a client level. So the Department of Health can be able to see, okay, where they need to maybe send more resources, more training to improve that. And then also from my side of things, to make sure that the application's working correctly, or that's, yeah. So there's quite a few. Sorry, I'm rambling.
No, that makes sense. It makes sense, right? And these are really what's great about your project, Stuart, as well, is that they're kind of distinct sets of audiences that they relate to one another, but they're also quite distinct types of stakeholders as well.
Yes.
In the process. So that's great. So I think what's really nice about this discussion is that we all are speaking to multiple audiences. And one of the big decisions that we have to think about, and we're going to now sort of dive into some of the framework and then get into Tableau, is that, you know, we have to be thinking about whether when we're designing a visualization, we're going to be attempting to all of our audiences, or we're going to be tailoring separate dashboards to particular audiences, right? And I think that's the big thing that we have to think about. Or are we going to segment one visualization where there's part of the visualization that's going to be speaking to one audience, part of the visualization that's going to be speaking to another, part that's not is going to be speaking to you know, a third audience, for example. These are decisions that we're going to all have to make about our visualization. Is, do we include them together or do we segment them? And there are a lot of reasons why we would do one or the other, right? But I want you to get to be thinking about this, right? And so let's think about these questions in the context of planning here. So we've already talked quite a lot about audiences, because audiences is sort of the key parts. But one of the places where data visualization kind of intersects a little bit with is sort of digital marketing to some extent. So you'll see this is sort of a modified example of what we call a branding board, right? So when we're branding something, as we do with our visualizations, we are branding them, whether we use that term or not, we are doing that, right? And the first thing we've been talking about really clearly is our audiences. Who are they? You know, what are their likes or dislikes? What do they expect about what they're seeing, right? So we start with the audiences. Second part is our core values. And I think in particular, I mean, all of our projects that we've just shared and things that we're working on right now have certain core values that we want to share and bring out in our visualization in subtle and non-subtle ways. We want to be explicit about what those core values may be, right? Then we have a third area, and this is a key area, I would say, particularly for Linda and Florence in particular, because you have a broader perhaps a broader digital media campaign that goes beyond your sharing of visualizations in some cases. But where do you want that visualization to appear? Right. So this is a key thing that we always have to think about: audience, core values, where we want to appear. For some of us, we want our visualizations to appear online in a website, right? On a mobile platform of some sort where people are interacting with it. But for some of us, we're designing visualizations that what we call are like two-dimensional, right? We're going to put them in brochures. We're going to do a visualization. We're going to export them as an image, and then they're going to go out into the world in some sort of two-dimensional form, right? And then some of us are placing that visualization in public spaces. So we're sharing it online with a broad group of individuals. Some of it's shared very purposely with particular individuals. So we want to be very clear about where that visualization is going to appear, right? And that intersects with who our audience is, right? Because where our audience is where we're going to reach them. What our attended piece is, that's where we're going to target that, right? So that top of that branding board is really key to the foundational piece. Underneath that are some more subtle things that we want to think about, right? We want to think about the feelings and emotions that we want to evoke from our visualization. And again, a lot of us are data people, are impact people, so we don't always think about emotions when we're trying to bring them together in a visualization. But thinking back to that rhino example that we shared at the beginning, it's trying to invoke an emotion out of you, right? It's data, but it's emotional as well, right? It's not emotional like you see NGOs put together those brochures that have long case studies of individuals and the impact of an individual person, right? It may not be playing that particular role, but it is trying to invoke some sort of emotion in you through different design elements, right? It also has, and when you're planning, some sort of personality and voice, right? We oftentimes don't think about this, but our data dashboards should have the particular voice that our organization has developed, right? Strategically. And all of us have different voices, right? At the Leaders of Africa Institute, Leaders of Africa, we have a voice that bridges sort of academic research. And so the high level research that we see in different fields in social science, public health, and science and technology, that's what we focus on, right? So we have researchers that come through our program that are high-end researchers. So we have a really professional research oriented voice, right? So that's one of our voices. Another one of our voices is all about creative expression, because we also do a lot of work with multimedia and how we communicate research as well as tech innovation to broad audiences. So we have sort of this sort of creative type of voice that we do, particularly a creative voice that speaks to people who are in their mid-careers. So we're thinking about people who are between 25 and 40 years old in particular. We don't like to, at Leaders of Africa, use the term youth because we think it's, you know, a very nebulous term, but we like to think about it as mid-career professionals, right? In that, somewhere in that element, as well as sort of young career faculty members as well, right? And so we have a personality and a voice online and in our data dashboards and other data outputs that we're sharing that communicate that voice, right? And again, this is a traditional branding exercise, but it becomes important in our data visualization, right? For engagement with our audience. And then the final thing, and this really goes to, you know, what was mentioned by Linda and Florence in particular, which is the key stories that are there, right? How we want to bring out key stories in our visualization. And we, of course, we're using data, but we can also use that data to speak, you know, to speak to certain voices that are that are being impactful. And oftentimes individual stories are quite impactful. If we see on LinkedIn, for example, we see that people more and more are telling stories of individuals and how they've achieved various accomplishments in their programs, in their careers, and in their lives. And that is resonating with people quite a lot, right? And obviously that story is one of many stories that may be very similar, right? That are there, or many sort of data points that are there. So we want to start with a branding board, and we want to think purposely about this. And we want to think about our colors and what and how they sort of support that, how our fonts and how they support that, which we're going to be talking about next, which is sort of the design elements here. And so when we get into Tableau in just a moment here, we're going to be thinking about, you know, how that brand that we're talking about speaks to that audience and how we've defined certain brand elements, right? And this really begins to certain key areas of branding. And I want to be really clear about one thing here when we're thinking about these design elements is that all of us have an organization. So Leaders of Africa Institute, Mobile Web Ghana, for example, right? And they have their own sort of set of guidelines when it comes to branding one's organization. But that doesn't mean that your visualization has to have all of the features of the branding of our organization. In fact, if we have a visualization that's speaking to a given project or a given sort of impact area, we may want to take some design elements of our organization and mix them with, for example, specific things that are branded to that project, right? And so we want to think about how that may be a little bit different, right? Or maybe tailored to the context or the visualization that we're creating, right? And that means a selection of fonts, right? A set of fonts, a set of colors, a set of main visual elements, imagery, iconography, and then figure style. So how our figures are designed should be very sort of similar, straightforward, and have that communication. We're going to talk about that as we go. And so let's think about colors here and fonts first. You know, I know all of us follow different sports teams. Some of us may not like sports, but perhaps we follow a favorite sports team. If I'm in the UK, my favorite sports team is a team called Aston Villa. They're not very good. They're sort of a mid-table Premier League team. If I'm in South Africa, for example, I guess I would go for the Kaizer Chiefs. And if I was in Ghana, because I know a couple of us are joining from Ghana, I guess I would go with the team that my wife generally supports. So let's say Hearts of Oak, for example. And obviously all these teams have certain branding elements here. These are the three jerseys, home and away, and third jersey of Aston Villa, right? They all have elements, similar sort of elements here, but different colors here, right? And it's not really trying to invoke some sort of impact right here, but it's starting to invoke a sort of a similarity in colors and similarities of fonts, right? So we see this a lot in sort of in jerseys here. And let's look at a tool here. And I'm going to post this tool here. Some of you have used this tool perhaps, and some of you have not. It's a free tool. And it comes from Adobe. And Adobe is a platform that is used for graphic design. So they allow you to edit video, audio, and a lot of different things, you know, special types of animations. Here at Leaders of Africa Institute, we use Adobe for a lot of our design studio work. And what you can see here is a color wheel here, and this allows you to play with colors, right? And one of the key first things that we're trying to think about are the colors that we're using. So we have these colors right here. We're gonna look at some color palettes in just a moment here. But we have different sort of color elements here that come through here. And we can do a lot of things here. We can play around with colors. You can do monochromatic. And what you do when you shift this around, if you shift the color wheel around, it's going to help us give color palettes to what we're doing. And that what is produced here are these hex codes. And the hex codes, and I know our audience is very familiar here with this, is, you know, these are the color codes that we're using. And these are monochromatic. So monochromatic means they're sort of keeping the similar color across here. So you see how the color wheel is grabbing colors that are very similar to one another, right? So it's very muted. So if you're doing something very subtle or muted, maybe you want to go with monochromatic. You can use triad. Triad's going to get very different colors here. And if you expand it out of the wheel, it's going to become stronger colors or more saturated colors. If you move it closer in the wheel, it's going to be more muted colors, right? It's going to have, it's going to include a little bit of whiteness in there. So they're going to kind of be faded, right? So less saturated, right? More saturated, less saturated, right? Maybe we want to get complementary colors. Complementary colors we often use quite a lot because these are colors that are going to kind of look good together. So they're going to have some similar colors here, but they're going to have some that are different colors. So we get to mix up the colors a bit, right? This is a really fun thing about design and creating that visualization, which can be a little bit creative, right? And again, perhaps we have organizations that have a color palette, but I'm going to argue that we have different projects that we may want to brand in different ways and visualizations that we really want to have distinguish themselves from our overarching organization brand in a little ways, right? Similar in little ways here. So we have different sort of pieces right here that we can look at. We also have a nice thing on Adobe where we can explore different color palettes, right? So say we don't want to be sort of playing around all day with colors, which you can do in the design studio. I've done in the design studio for a lot of time. So like you can see right here, we got different color palettes here. So you can go through, and what's really nice is they've included some imagery that may sort of evoke certain things. So we're going to go through here. We can see different color palettes here and what they may represent, right? And all of these are going to evoke certain emotions and things right here. I like this color palette right here. It looks really nice. This is sort of a tech color palette, right? Tech generally has sort of purple, light bluish, you know, this sort of turquoise color, right? So you see this a lot in the tech space, for example, in the broader tech space, these colors come out. So again, you can get some inspiration from these color palettes here right in Adobe, and it's all free. So you don't have to be a Adobe Suite member to do it. They also have a trends area so that you can look at sort of trends. And then you can, if you are an account user, you can open up your library and save them. But you can save them just by simply downloading the color palettes as well. So if we go here, is it not gonna, yeah, there we go. So you can actually go here and save this. And what this will do is it's gonna save it like this, right? It's gonna save it as a color palette like this. So you get to see this and you can present this alongside your visualization and help you think about the different colors that are included, right? And so this is a great way of doing that here. And so let's just share in the chat here, you know, what do these colors sort of suggest to you, right? When you see these colors, what do they sort of suggest to you, right? If you were to see this, what sort of feelings, emotions, or use cases would you say for this? This is a little bit hard. But what industries or use cases might you see with these colors? Yeah, we see, yeah, Florence, you often hear this word of dull for colors, which is an interesting adjective we use because it may be dull for our purposes, right? And this is the key thing with color in design for our data visualizations, is we may think that, the brown color right here is dull, but that may be because we're accustomed to, in our area, using more of the yellows and the whites, right? That are there, right? In addition to that, one of the things that's interesting about this is that there's kind of a contrast right here, a contrast between bright at the one hand and then muted, right? Imagine if this was all yellows, maybe we would say, whoa, blown back by the color, but maybe we're using a more muted color. So I'm not going to use the word dull here. I'm going to use the word muted. We're going to say that this is sort of a muted color, perhaps to bring out the yellows, right? So we got some great ideas here. So let's see here. The construction industry. Yes. Yes, Linda. I think this is sort of, you see this sort of the yellowish color, right? Because people are wearing those yellow reflectors on themselves when they're working. So they're playing off of some of those colors, or the traditional yellow hard hats to, make sure to identify workers. So we oftentimes see yellow, and then the construction elements are oftentimes this sort of muted color, right? So yeah, we'd use that. Stuart said, and this is a direct message to me, so everyone didn't see it, but he said calm or subtle, right? So this has got a kind of a serene element to it. And then, Florence said the yellow is very bright, right? So very bright. So the yellows are coming out here. So there is this sort of a little lightheartedness to this, a bit piece here. All right. So we've got another. We'll look at one other color palette. Here's another one, but let's look at this one because it's a little bit different. What emotions does this invoke? And also, what industries would you see these colors, which are very different than the last two? Yeah, this one's an interesting one, right? Linda says it evokes a feeling of excitement, right? All right, good. I would agree with that. I would agree with that. Music or art industry, right? All right. So maybe we have music or royal colors in some cases, because we got this sort of purplish color here. So we got sort of a royalty color here. So music industry. All right. Any other thoughts? I would say tech a little bit. This is common colors with a lot of tech startups. They really love this sort of purple color and the blue color, right? Particularly international tech brands, right? Love this sort of color, these sort of colors, particularly also in website design. You see a lot of this type of blue, a lot of this type of color, right? So if you're in the tech space, maybe music or art industry, if you want to invoke sort of excitement, perhaps this is sort of the color scheme you want to use, right? It is a little bit harder on the eyes, right? Some of these colors like here kind of, I mean, if you stare at it for a while, it may, hurt your eyes just a little bit, but it comes out quite a lot. It is a nice sort of color palette here, but notice this sort of colors. All right. So these are some colors that we're looking at here. Let's look at font options here. And the title on the slide for some reason didn't come out right. So let's now flip to font options, right? So what are these sort of, what are these font? We can think, well, let's do this simply because I want to get into the Tableau demonstration, but we can do the same thing with font options and spend time doing this, right? What kind of emotions do these evoke, right? So this one's sort of a tech feel, right? We're using Montserrat, we're using Open Sans for both the header 2 as well as the paragraph text. So this is the paragraph text here. This is the header 2, so the main header here, and then this is Montserrat. Montserrat is sort of a tech feel, right? So you oftentimes see Open Sans, Montserrat for tech feel, right? And then this one, font options, this is going to be sort of serious and elegant, right? So we have this sans serif font right here. That's sort of the class of fonts that is used here. And then we've got some of the sans fonts right here underneath here. This is Praxin Nova. This is Dido, right, which is here, or Dido. right? So again, we have sort of these font options that give a professional elegance sort of flavor to them. And then we go here. This again is sort of more text or artistic, right? So we got this very light oriented font right here, using Proxinova in a light shading for the text, right? So the point here is we can spend all day having fun with fonts and having fun with colors. But the point here that I want you to draw your attention to as we get into Tableau now is that these evoke certain types of feelings and emotions, right? Just because Tableau has its Tableau font doesn't mean you need to use the Tableau font. Or just because Tableau has some easy to use colors in it doesn't mean that you want to just use, for example, the Tableau colors, right? And make it Tableau, right? In fact, in many ways, you're sort of rebranding your visualization as a Tableau visualization. You want to think creatively about these design elements because they speak to your audience. They actually do some of the work for you without using text. And as I said before, we have, we don't want to, we don't want to use too much text. So let's get into Tableau. And we're going to be, and just to sort of preface this, I want to pull down my Tableau here and start sharing that. So Tableau comes in different forms. Today, we're going to be using the Tableau public, because a lot of us are using the free version of Tableau, at least for now. But maybe your organization like Leaders of Africa has Tableau desktop, the full version of Tableau desktop, or these different Tableau elements. These are more about data wrangling, but we're going to be focusing on sort of Tableau desktop, Tableau public, or Tableau online, the free versions here, because we know that many of you have access to those. And in addition to that, these are the platforms we're going to be using for some of the design elements, right? And the nice thing about Tableau, as we're going to see, and I know some of us, like Stuart was mentioning before today's session, and I know some of you use Tableau already, it's easy to use, right? You can create interactive visualizations. You can, it's easy to learn. All these great things about Tableau, we may say, and it's used by a lot of major organizations, including our organization of Leaders of Africa. And the nice feature about Tableau also is, and it's also a downside, is that there's a lot of flexibility you can do with design, right? And this is the key trade-off that I want to emphasize as we're getting into Tableau and actually applying some of these design principles, is that there's a trade-off here, a trade-off between, on the one hand, design and having flexibility and having a template, right? Having a template is great because it makes you, and it puts you in certain design frameworks, right? And you can't really play around with it, right? But of course, when you have a template, you can't do much, right? It's not flexible, right? So you may want to do things, but you find it hard to do it. But if you have no template, as we're going to use in Tableau, and Tableau can be used and often is used in the default setting without any template. If you're working without a template, you have massive amounts of flexibility, but that flexibility allows us to make significant design mistakes. In other words, it allows us the opportunity to make really bad looking visualizations. So that's the trade-off. A template gives us structure, but maybe too much structure, so we can't tailor it to what we want. Flexibility, such as we see in Tableau, gives us a lot of flexibility, but also great opportunities to make design mistakes, right? And that's why we want to be thinking about, you know, this sort of design oriented piece in terms of this continuum here, right, between templates and non-templates. So let's get into Tableau today. And I'm going to share some data. I'm using this data here, but unlike our Tableau session yesterday, we are not going to be creating these figures, sort of bringing in the data today, because I'm going to assume that many of us know how to do that. We're going to be focusing on the design elements after. So I'm going to put the data in the chat here that we're using. Similar data. There's a second data set in addition to what we're using, but I'm going to take you through what that data is, so at least you know what we're using here. So let's pull up Tableau here, and this is where we're actually going to start today. We're going to start with what I'd say is a very confused dashboard, right? Has a lot of figures, a lot of different data sources. It's confused, right? And believe it or not, if you go on to Tableau's Discover platform, a lot of people have visualizations that look something like this. It looks like it was cobbled together very quickly, right? It has a lot of information, some great features to it, but it doesn't have a design thinking behind this, right? But let's before we get into our dashboard, our Tableau, which we're going to be working on in this dashboard, let's start with the data sources here that we're using here. And if we can go back to that, sorry, let me go back into this. So we are using a variety of different data sources in this example here. Oh, it pulled open this, sorry. So we are looking at a couple of data sources here. So the first data source here, if we go back into our actual tabs here, sorry, here we go, is we're looking at data that is COVID data. So we're building kind of a where is Africa now in terms of COVID as well as development indicators. So we have a lot of different data sources, right? So the first set of data we're using, and we used this in our demonstration yesterday, is COVID-19 data over time. Right. So this is daily counts of COVID data in all African countries. Right. So this is the first data set right here. And this is joined. And for those of you who use Tableau, what we're using is a join feature. Yes. So Florence, if you want to follow along, you can launch Tableau here. I'm not going to be sort of loading the data here because we want to focus on the design elements, but feel free to launch your Tableau and bring in this data. And all you need to do to bring in the data to show it as we're doing it here, the easy way to do it is just bring in all of the different data sets here. So I've got the COVID-19 data. I've got the Gapminder data, which has life expectancy, GDP per capita, and population. And what all you need to do is use the union between the countries, right? These can all be merged on the country variable really easily, right? We clean the data for you. So all you need to do is use the union function in a Tableau when you're bringing in the data. And I'm going to assume, since we've already done the sort of Tableau course and many of us work on it, we understand what that union function is. But if you're having a little bit trouble, I can talk you through it a bit, Florence, because I know you want to follow along. And that's great that we're following along, because that's oftentimes the best way to learn things is to follow along. All right, great. All right, we also have education data, educational expenditure, GDP growth, and then we have internet data as well. So we have all of this data. It all has a common variable, which is country, right? So we're at the country level. We also have a regional variable there as well. And what I did before today's session, and these are the same figures we created in yesterday's Tableau section, are created a number of figures. So our first figure here is case counts across Africa aggregated over time, right? That's what this is. And this is two figures here. I've added a line graph here, and I've added an area graph, and I put them together so that we have these two colors that are coming up here, right? We got this here. This figure right here is a figure of cases, the same thing as before, but the difference between this one and the previous one is that this is deaths. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of deaths because of COVID-19, but these are the total number of deaths per day in African countries, right? So you see this sort of orange down here. This is deaths and these are cases. And thank God we don't have as many deaths as we've seen cases here. But you can see that there's still far too many deaths and in other countries and other contexts, even more if we were to plot that, right? And then we can also look at this separately. This is by country, total deaths. And this is African countries only, right? So these are total deaths. You can see South Africa, Morocco, Tunisia. You can see the list here. We have total cases, total deaths right here. Sorry, I think I was looking at cases. Life expectancy. So maybe we're thinking about life expectancy here. And then we have COVID-19 cases in a map, right? So maybe we want to show a map. So this is cases in a map. And then we also have population of African countries in a map. And then internet access, what I've done is the whole world. So we get to see the whole world on this one, right? So we have a lot of different figures. And I've used the data that is shared in the chat to create these before today's session. So I'm going to assume that we know how to create this because we've had the Tableau introductory session. We know how to sort of create these figures here. I've done a little bit of filtering to take out all the other countries around the world, but to focus us in Africa. And then all I did here was simply drag and drop all of these. We'll drag and drop deaths here as well into our dashboard, right? It's a mess. It's a real mess, right? So let's start to think about how we get ourselves out of this mess and how we speak to the audience, right? So the first thing that we want to determine here, as we talked about earlier in today's session, is who is the audience for this, right? And I'm going to volunteer some audiences here. And in the chat, you can tell me if there's some other potential audiences that we may be wanting to engage with this particular figure here. So I'll say one of the audiences that we want to educate people are the public health workers, public health audiences, right? People who are thinking about issues of life expectancy, issues of COVID proliferation. So we're going to speak to some of those people, right? All right. Let's also speak a little bit here, and I'm going to say that we're also speaking to those people who are interested to some degree in internet access and how COVID is perhaps affecting people in education. So maybe we have some people in public health that are interested in this, life expectancy, case counts, things of this nature. But we also may have people who are interested in disruptions, broadly speaking, of COVID-19, disruptions that happen in public health, but also in the education sector. And for those of you who know, I know at my home institution where I'm a professor, we went all online for one of our semesters. And then when we came back, we were doing hybrid, some people online, some people in person, and now we're back in person fully, right? Because a lot of people, I think 99% of those people at my university are vaccinated, something like that, right? So it's become a little bit safer, right? And one of the things that we had to contend with, all of us had to contend with, is that we were all using mobile learning, right? We're using digital learning, Zoom, and all these tools to engage with one another, right? So maybe by including some internet access, we're also thinking about how the various sort of changes in COVID-19 demographics are going to be changing our usage and our expansion of internet access and the use of that, right? So maybe we're speaking to some of those folks, right? So again, we have this sort of audience in mind when we're creating it, right? The other thing that we may want to do, audience we may want to say is beyond those people, we may want to say people are just kind of curious about public health data, right? So I've included here a filter, and this filter is going to allow us to sort of select a country. So if I select Angola, for example, it's going to give us all of the Angola examples. So if you're interested to know how I did this, then please watch the recording from yesterday's session, because that's when we covered how we make a filter for an entire Tableau dashboard, right? So we're kind of building on what we talked about yesterday. So notice how we're doing that. If we go to Burundi, for example, we can take a look at this. Some of these countries is quite interesting, had at one point denied the pandemic. Burundi was one country where they had a former president who actually died because of the pandemic after a period of denial of its effects. So you can see that a lot of cases, fair number of cases, new cases have been reported in recent months in country Burundi. Again, we can explore this. We'll go to all countries right here. And of course, this is African countries that are represented in our all as filter, right? So let's start diving in here. And we want to start removing certain things. And the key thing that we're going to be using here is some of the this format area up here, as well as simply side clicking. So you can't see this. And this is the hard thing when we're doing a demo online, is you don't see that I'm side clicking here, but I am side clicking here, and it allows me to do a lot of different things, right? It allows me to hide titles. It allows me to format titles. So I'm going to click format title. And what we can see here is that this title, for example, pulls up different design elements, right? It pulls up sort of the title, the fonts. So if we go around here, we can click, we can see all the different fonts here, right? We can play, we're going to play around with them. And we also have some default shading. So this is like the background shading for the entire dashboard. So when we're using the title here, we're also doing the entire dashboard. Let's leave it at white for now, or none, right? So we can start to change the whole features here. And all I'm doing is side clicking on this title and saying format title. for the whole dashboard, because we're in dashboard view right here, right? We also have remove from dashboard. So say we don't want to have the title of our dashboard, which is down here, as the title. I'm going to do that because I'm going to trust, we can edit the title here, or we can just simply edit it right here. And we're just going to edit it here or remove. Either way is perfectly fine here. And we'll say COVID-19 and cross-national Africa perspective, right? We want to think very creatively about our title here as well. This one's sort of pretty engaging, right? COVID-19, its impact across national perspective, or sometimes we want to use a question. Oftentimes I like to have data Tableau visualizations that start with a question. So we're answering a question here, and we do that. I'm going to use a title like this, but if you're interested in titles, and some of us find creating titles very difficult, think about a question, because your data dashboards oftentimes answering questions. So let's take a look at the fonts that we have access to us. And since we talked a lot about fonts, we want to think about different fonts that we may use. So let's take a look at a common one in tech, Montserrat, and that's what it's going to look like. So Tableau is going to give us a real look at what that's going to look like. And of course, we want to do that up front. Yeah, that's a little harsh. That's a little sort of too techy. So let's go to Open Sans here. So again, we can play around. That's a sort of a generic font here. All right, let's search around here. This is where we want to sort of think about what design elements we include here, right? And there are a lot of different types of fonts we can use. At Leaders of Africa, we generally use this font. So we use what we call ITC Avant-Garde. So it's a sort of really high-end, it's a designer font. But that's also included in Tableau. And that's the beautiful thing about Tableau, is that it includes so many different font options for you, including from the common ones to the ridiculous. So we're going to use just a kind of common font here. Let's just go with Benton right here. We're going to use Benton Sans, right? It's a nice sort of sans font. And if you're looking at fonts, oftentimes you want to use sans fonts. Those are the ones that don't have sort of the tails to the letters, right? They're very smooth lettering. And that's what we oftentimes see in dashboards today. Stuart says, do you have a font, or do you change depending on the client, etc.? Yeah, this is a great question. So when we're doing Leaders of Africa Institute dashboards, like it's under Leaders of Africa. So if you go to our website, and you'll see our website is very different than a lot of organizations. It's very creative focused, right? Because we have a creative focus, and we want what our scholars, our fellows at our institute do. We want it to come out, our research to pop out in sort of unique ways. And you can see how the structure of our homepage, very different than your average website. And that's because we have a lot of designers as part of our team. And so when we're doing it, we use this font, which is the ITC font here, if it's coming on the Leaders of Africa type of dashboard. But if we're doing a client-oriented, client-facing work, I would suggest using either the client's font or a font that fits the project that the client is doing, right? Because you want it to speak to what they're doing and what the project is doing, and then include in there some elements of perhaps your organization, right? So you may have some features of it, surrounding the logo or surrounding some text boxes about the author that bring out your particular organization fonts. But if it's for a client or for a particular project, then you may want to brand that project separately. That's what I would say. So for COVID-19 and its impacts, if we were doing this as part of Leaders of Africa, we wouldn't want Leaders of Africa's font there. We want it to speak to COVID-19 and its impact, right? And even when we do special sessions, so if you go to our website and you go to our original series, so we have podcasts as well. So our podcasts that we put on that are about political, economic, social issues. So for example, our original series here, our podcast this week, for example, this week's a story about Africa in the news. So if you're interested in like political issues in Africa in the news, discussed in tech front, this is the podcast for you. So this is the key core team members who are a part of this podcast. This one is branded as part of Leaders of Africa because this is the one that we're doing. But if you look at other podcasts or original series that we help other organizations do, we brand those separately, even though they even may be on the Leaders of Africa platform, because we want it to speak to their particular issue in their podcast and such. So we have, for example, original series that will come out next year on issues of agricultural sort of food security issues, as well as issues of corruption and cybersecurity. So we'll be producing a number of with local folks on the ground who are producing this, and we're supporting them. Their whole branding is completely separate, although they will be featured on the Leaders of Africa Institute and Leaders of Africa website. So you can see that there. So yeah, if you're interested in the podcast stuff, check it out. We talk a lot about different things ongoing in different countries, and there's plenty of things to talk about that, at least that one. So I hope that answered your question, Stuart. And that's something for us all to think about, in that sort of how do we differentiate things? So we want to differentiate this public health dashboard. So let's use this tech font here. I'm going to use Benton. And one of the nice things about using Benton here is that it's not a common font. So you want to also think about where you're getting your fonts, whether you're using a font that everyone sees every day. We at Leaders of Africa like to use different fonts that people tend to not see oftentimes. So it brands us and it makes things pretty separate. And if you go to fonts in use, I love this website. If you go to fonts in use, right here, this website tells you sort of the newest fonts, newest and greatest fonts, and sort of design elements, and who is using them, what organizations are using them, and what use cases are they using them. So it's a great website for you to get sort of inspiration on different types of font, right? And I see a lot of times with a lot of organizations, they're always going to the same font. And our design team at Leaders of Africa, we're always like, why are you doing that? Be creative, use your font, separate yourself, have that distinguishing flavor to what you're doing or what your client is expecting, right? And so have fun with fonts. Fonts do a lot of work. The reason why we're spending so much time on them is they actually help us quite a lot, right? They're really important. All right, so check out that website, Fonts in Use. Great place for inspiration. So let's go to the font size here, and we want to have a pretty big size font for our title here. And then we want to also think about the colors, right? And so here's where we bring up the color menu, and we have the what we call canned colors in Tableau. We can add custom colors here. So we can add custom colors here by using the hex code. So let's go back to where we were having fun with colors here. And in Adobe Color, actually, took down that site because I'd done it over it. There we go. Let's pull up in this. Remember this color wheel thing here. So we're going to take some inspiration. We're going to kind of play around with what a public health feel is. So I'm going to go to the Explore tab here. And we're going to try and pick some colors that sort of speak to COVID related work, right? And so we're thinking about health. We're thinking about sort of a disease, death, as well as intervention. So I'm thinking a little bit of, reds, right? Reds or oranges, because those colors generally invoke sort of that bit of alarm. But I also don't want this to be sort of like super alarming, right? I want people to be looking at this dashboard and perhaps planning to think about what they're going to be doing with this dashboard. So let's search around here for some color palettes. And again, I'm taking you through the thought process. I want you to kind of see how we work. We don't immediately jump to something. In fact, we may spend half the day looking at colors, but we're not going to do that here. So let's go through. We see a number of different inspirations here. We're looking for a little bit of red features here that are there. We also want to have some sort of building blocks here. So let's take a look at this one right here. I like this. This is blue, red, blue, orange, yellow. So it's got a lot of the colors there. And so what I want to do is I want to download this let's see here. There we go. I'm signing into my account here. All right, let's go here. So it's gonna allow me to download that. Oh, it brought me out. Sorry about that. So let's go back to that one or a similar one, because we don't want to spend too much time searching through colors here. So I think that was on. Yeah, here we go. Where was that one? Sometimes it makes you go in there. I should have just clicked there. Okay, all right. Sorry about that. Yeah, Adobe has all these things, and if you're Adobe user, it wants to push you. There we go. So let's open it. There we go. All right, so here we go. Let's copy the color codes here. And so they're really easy to copy from our color palette. You just simply say copy. So we're going to bring things in, and I don't want red to be my title here. I want, maybe let's go with this blue color right here. And so let's go back to our dashboard here. Let's close out that one. So let's go here. And what we do is we cut and paste the hex code into, I guess it didn't catch here. Well, I guess it's having trouble copying. That's what happens sometimes when I'm using Zoom. It does that. So let's pull up Tableau here to the side. Or, so let's go BF, F, so it's going to be BFOF, right? So these are the color codes here, and then 30. So if we move here, oh, there we go, BFOF. Okay, I'm missing the O here. There we go. So there's our red right here. And so we're going to add this to custom colors because that will be easier for us to select. So there we go. So we can add the red here, but we actually want the blue. So I'm going to add a second color to our palette here. So we're adding these colors to our palette because they become easier. So this is 1A I90, 1A I90. All right, let's go back here. And then D9. Let's see. Let's make sure I got that one right. So 1A90D9. There we go. And let's add it to the color palette. So select, oh, there we go. Oops. 1A90D9. There we go. There we go. Excellent. You can see one of the things you want to do with the colors is you want to have a separate document, with your color palette. So you're just copying and pasting. But for whatever reason, it's not allowing me to do that here, right? So let's bold this up here like this. And then there we go. We're beginning our dashboard here. And then the other thing we want to do here is we want to justify this in the center. There are different things that we can do. We can justify this in the center. We can apply it here, and apply will show it here. And that way we can start to adjust things. So we can have the title here. But we also can do a lot of things here. We can resize these things as well. And we can try and change this. So one of the key things you want to side click here is the floating command here. And floating allows this to kind of move around, right? And so as I said before, the problem with floating is that it allows you to move things, but it also makes you create design mistakes because it's not in a it's sort of not in the template. But let's float it. And I'm going to be floating most of these charts here so that we can move them around. So I'm going to put it right here. So COVID-19 and its impacts. So the first thing that I want to show is sort of COVID-19. So we're going to start moving these around here. I'm going to start floating them. So I'm going to click here. And so if I go click on this little arrow here, I can click floating. And that's going to allow me to start dragging things around here. So I'm going to go to this figure here. I'm going to float it. And again, you don't have to float all of these things. You can actually use the design features there. So if we go back here to, we get out of here, you can use different text icons or horizontal text blocking. So this adds space. So if you use vertical, then this will add a space here. If you want to add a horizontal, this will actually add spaces there. So you can use sort of the geometric features of Tableau here to create the space that you need. But if you really want to kind of move things around freehand, that's when you've got to float things, right? And we're floating things here, right? So I just want to be clear. You don't have to float things. You can use the sort of the spacing there to sort of arrange things, but we want to do things a little bit more boutique. So I'm going to start floating all my figures. And then this becomes kind of confusing here because everything is moving around. It's still all connected. It's still all working. Don't want that. Let's move this. All right. Float here. We're almost done floating all of our figures. And I purposely put a lot of figures here because it allows us to do quite a lot. Here we go. The map, size U. All right. There we go. So we floated things here. All right. So after we sort of float things here, we want to be very cognizant of the size of our Tableau, just to use the word. And that is done right here. You see the size thing here? This size thing allows us to fix the size of our canvas. So we can fix it height and width, have a fixed height for our canvas. And that gives us more or less space to work with. The downside of a fixed height is that sometimes we adjust our Tableau visualization to be so big that it doesn't fit on a website. Let's go back to our examples at the beginning here and notice one thing here. These ones fit across the page, right? They don't overlap. I don't have to scroll, and I don't even have to scroll up or down. Look at this one. This one, I don't have to scroll up or down. I don't have to scroll back and forth, right? That's nice. This one, I have to scroll up and down just a little, but I don't have to scroll horizontally. And if you're making your Tableau visualization one that is going to be placed on an online platform, you want to make sure that people do not have to scroll left and right. That really, makes things very jarring with your dashboard. So you can add a bit of length to it, right? If you have a lot of figures here, but you want to make sure that your feature is going to fit on an average screen size. And I really suggest that you have some computer that you look at this on, and it's some computer that is about 14 inches in screen size, right? Because that's sort of the minimal size of a laptop these days, 13.5 to 14 inches, right? If it works for a 13 or 14 inch screen, then it's going to work for any type of screen. And the way we adjust that canvas size is right here where it says custom size here, right? And the one I'm going to be using here is automatic. And automatic is really nice because it allows it to sort of adjust to the actual screen size that we want here. So we see automatic here, but we have custom. So you notice all of these are different pixel heights for generic desktop. So a generic desktop, when we're viewing it on desktop computer, is going to be about 1300 here, right? So these give you some side guidelines here. I'm going to use automatic because that's going to work really nice just for your average size here. So there we go. Let's change it back to automatic, right? And so this is, if we publish it, it's going to be great width and good length here. Right. But this is really important. This is where a lot of designers go wrong, is they design a canvas for their visualization that doesn't work for different screens. And that's the first thing we kind of want to do here as we're getting our title arranged. So our title's floated here, and I can size this title in the way that I want here. I'm going to size it in the corner here because I want there to be some spaces here. I want to have some spaces like a panel on the far left-hand side, a panel on the middle, and a panel on the right, right? So I'm going to sort of think about this as sort of 3 different panels that I'm showing my viewers. And that's the way you want to think about when you're designing your elements, is in panels. So now I want to go to the story. I want to go to the story from a perspective of looking at cases and then delving down into their impacts, right? As we talked about at the beginning, we want to tell stories with the data. So I've got a couple of figures here that may be able to help us with that. So we've got the total deaths, life expectancy, total cases by day, and then an Africa map, right? And I'm gonna start with here the Africa map, because that gives us an overview of sort of where cases are in total right here in a very visual way. So I'm going to move this one right here. I'm going to move this here. And one of the things that you have right here, if you click on this triangle, is ability to move the map, right? And this map moving allows you to center the map and center and zoom it. And whatever you zoom it into will be what the person sees it when they first enter your visualization. So they can play around with it, but it's wherever they're going to see. And I'm going to zoom in such that, the Africa map is sort of all present here, right? And is perfectly in line here. And it also fits this sort of general, this general height of this one right here. I'm going to pull it off the edge. I'm going to leave a little bit of a margin right here. Again, I'm worried about spacing. Again, spacing, fonts, and colors. We're going to color this map in a second here. So there we go. We've got the map here, and we've got this title. And we can change the title here. We're going to change it. We're going to change the title here just a bit, but I'm going to actually take off the title on this one because I want to add sort of a manual text title. So I'm going to take this off here. I'm going to take this off and I'm going to move this down right here. And I'm going to include right here a text box right here. And then it's going to say text. And I want to go to the same font that I'm using because I'm going to use the Benton Sans as our example here. So if we go back here, you're going to see that Benton Sans is going to be the one that we want to do, demi. And we have two different fonts. So we have the bold font and we have the non-bold font. So we're going to be using both of these. So let's take right here and we're going to make this size a little bit bigger here. And we're going to say COVID-19 cases have increased over the past 2 years. And you're going to see I'm not just doing a boring title for my figure. I'm actually saying what you see in each of the figures, right? And that's a good practice to have when you're doing data visualization from a content perspective, right? So I've used the blue here for my piece. So I'm going to go back to my color palette here, and we're going to pull off another color. A color that's going to be a little bit better for some of the text features here. And these aren't really great colors for text, but we're going to go with them. And we're going to use the orange font here. So I'm going to try and take that font here. I'm going to actually pull this aside so I can see the numbers on my other monitor, although it's a little bit far to see. Hold on one moment. Again, we're designing together here. We're seeing how this goes. All right, so let's go F2 and then 8C and then 0F. All right, there's that orange font. I'll add it to the custom colors here. And then here we go. We're going to have this as sort of our title, and we're going to bold this title right here. And we're going to go here. And we're going to float the text. Again, we're floating everything. And we're going to go right here and we're going to do that. And then we're going to, for example, this we're not going to have centered. We're going to mix things up and we're going to have this one actually left aligned. So here we go. So here we go. We've got this blue and this orange color starting to come out here. And then we got this panel here. I've used the text features here because I'm going to have text that's going to go in between here. So let's add some text here. And we'll drag the text over and we're going to go Benton and we're going to go sans booked. And this is going to be our body text. And our text is that we're going to say increases in COVID-19 have varied across countries, with the hardest hit countries being South Africa. And then we could say Morocco and Tunisia, right? For example, right? And we're gonna enlarge this. For this font, I'm going to use a dark color because it's font text that I want to come out. And so it gives me sort of this light color, gray color, but I'm gonna move it to more of a black, but I'm not gonna do black, right? Here's a really fun design trick. A lot of designers do not use black color for their designs. They actually use a black that is slightly less than black. So let's design this color here. So let me go to a color space here. I'm going to go to black here, and I'm going to pull this down here, and I'm going to get not black, but something a little bit grayer than black, or sometimes you even do a little bit redder than black, right? So it's not in your face black. It's dark, but it's a little less, right? Like 2-1, 2-1, 2-1. Right? That's a really fun design trick for those of you who didn't know this, is that oftentimes we're using black. We're not using black. We're using a sort of a slightly diminished form of it. So I'm going to use that right here. And so that's going to bring this out. Increase in COVID-19 have varied across countries. So we're going to do this, and then I'm going to float it, and I'm going to start moving this around. So I'm going to pull this around. I'm going to justify this. And again, we can see that the text is a little bit too big here for this, for our liking, right? So we're going to come back here, and the way that which we do that is you just simply shrink the text here. There we go. And we want it to be legible, and we're going to have this sort of aligned like this. All right. But notice also how we're keeping a nice little margin right here, right? We're keeping a little nice margin right here as well. And so these are little fun little design techniques that we're doing. All right, let's go to the map here, and let's start color. Let's sort of look at the format of the map here, and you can see that there are a couple things that we can do here. We can, for example, change the color of the. Hold on, let's see. We're going to be changing the backgrounds of everything here in a moment. So you can change, for example, the color of the background of the map. So this is the worksheet here, right? So this begins to change the color of the countries and how they come out. So if we go here, for example, we can do different colors, right? So we can have our sort of bluish color here, although our bluish color is a little bit too harsh of a color. So we may want to just sort of move it down a little bit, just sort of lighten up that blue a little bit. So I'm going to go straight down this color palette to kind of get a diminished blue. And so then it sort of, it comes out with that bluish color right there. So we're sort of having this sort of same color map that matches this blue here. So just a little bit of that. And then we can also look at the pane color. So we can also change sort of the overarching pane, but we're going to go back to this blue color here. We're going to keep this as this color here. All right. So again, we can play around with this and change our map colors, but we should have sort of things be in common color with one another, right? The other thing we can start to do here is we can start to change some of the backgrounds to things, right? So if we come to this feature here, and we go to our worksheet here. Yeah, format title here. So if we go to dashboard shading here, we side click here, we can sort of start changing how things appear. Right now, we don't want this sort of feature here of being too blue, because blue is our color. So we're going to have a color as our background that sort of brings out all of our colors. That looks good. So we have a number of them that are here. We can play around with them. I like, in this case, we're going to just do like an off-white, right? So this is a color that's not white. So it's not like this. This looks really boring, right? So if we just have a white background, it's not going to look very visually appealing. But if we just simply add a little bit of off-white, all of a sudden this starts to look a little bit more professional. Right. So a lot of us just want to design a dashboard that's, white or white-esque, like, just by changing that, we begin to have this sort of feature here. Right. And, this is the nice thing about this is that you can begin to sort of shade different titles. Right. So this shades our titles. We're not going to do this. This is all the dashboard shading. So when you work in this pane off of the title, if you go to, for example, format the title and you bring up the dashboard piece, this is going to format all of those things that are in your entire dashboard. So if you want to do it all in once, you can do it right here. But oftentimes, again, like we're like what I'm showing you is we're doing it sort of in individual ways of doing it, right? So let's move it here and there, right? So again, we have different things that we can do, and then we can format. Again, we're going to formatting here. So format text object is going to give us aligned, is going to give us those features. If we go to format text, we can pull up this. If we format sort of the elements here, then we can do it like that. So again, we're starting to see sort of how this comes together. So let's start arranging our features here and then changing some backgrounds. All right, so we have COVID-19 cases here. Second thing we may want to do is we may want to show this figure here. And we want to show the number of COVID cases per day. Okay, so let's lay this down. And one of the options that we have here next to this one is whether we want to have this sized like this, big like this, or whether we want to just sort of collapse it. And one of the things that you want to do with design is you kind of want to nest things in one another. So I'm going to move this right here. And I'm going to kind of nest things. So I'm going to have this one be a little bit flatter. So it's not going to be full size. And I'm going to take away the title. And I'm going to come here. Right. And I'm going to create a new, I'm going to create a new title. Okay. There we go. All right, there we go. So Tableau is just one of these things that you have to click around a little bit in the menus. So we can go, let's go with our Benton, our same Benton font here. It's not pulling up like it was before. Okay, here we go. Benton's so we're going to do, similar font here. And one of the things you'll notice when we select the colors, our colors are now here, right? Copy and paste is a new feature coming soon. Yeah, exactly. So, so what you can see here is my color palette, since we created it, is right here. So all that time we spent having to copy or manually code in the colors becomes really easy once it's in here. So let's do this, say COVID-19 cases over time. Let's add, actually, I wanted to add here, I'm looking at my notes, 3 waves of COVID-19 cases, right? 3 waves of COVID-19 cases. And we want to make sure that the font is the same as here. So if we go here and we go to text options, and this should be written down, this is a 14. So we want to really come up with a style guide here. So we want to make sure everything's consistent. And then obviously we want to float this. And it always is going to appear here. So let's say edit text. And so here, floating. And then we're going to float it. Always pops up over there. And then we're gonna leave some space here, and then we're gonna get this one going. We see that the colors here are actually, we've got the colors that we want coming into our features here. We got this orange color, and this should be 14 font. You got to highlight it here. That's the thing you always got to remember, is that highlighting it there. And then we also can add in the text. And I'm not going to do too much. I'm not going to do the whole dashboard here for the sake of time, but we're seeing how we're beginning to do this, how it sort of comes together with some of the decisions that we've made about our text. And we're doing little things along the way. I'm going to show you some other sort of tricks here to get to think about our designs here. But think about yourself when you're at this phase of your dashboard as a designer, right? That's what I want you all to be thinking about, is that you have crossed over the line of being a designer. So COVID-19 infections have come in 3 distinct waves. Has been similar across most African countries. So I'm adding some text here. Again, you don't want to have too much text on your data visualization. That's something that I talked about at the beginning of today's session, is that text is, you don't want to have too much text. So I'm having 1 sentence things here. I think I can go down to 11, I believe it was 11 there. There we go. So again, we're starting to pull this up. And there we go. This is all transparent. These boxes can be resized, but it's all transparent, right? So there we go. We're starting to have this visualization come together. Again, the one other thing about Tableau that is a little obnoxious about Tableau is that it doesn't have guidelines. So if some of you are familiar with working in Power BI, they have those little nice snap lines that appear. I think, you know, Tableau, I think you may be able to have those appear, but, you know, in general, you're able to kind of eyeball things a little bit. But I think there's a way, I think there may be even a way to do pixel counts and things of that nature to make sure that it's there. If you dive into some of the settings and custom coding. So anyway, we're creating this dashboard here. And one of the things that we're doing here is we're nesting things in here. So let me say total cases here. We're going to put this one on the top. And we're just going to finish with this one for the sake of time because we're running a little bit late and we want to finish on the hour here. So let's imagine we don't have these figures here. But I'm going to say total cases here. I'm going to hide the title again. And I'm going to put this one right here, and I'm going to do this here. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make sure that the title is the highest thing on this data visualization here. I want this title to be higher than any other sort of feature here on this visualization. I'm going to start moving things down a little bit. You can use the cursor to do this. So once we're respacing things. But you want to use white space really well, right? You want to have space in between things and you want to be as consistent as you can with that space because that's going to be what is going to help give that polish here. Yeah, so Florence has the question, how will the audience clearly understand without the help of more or too much text? So one of the tricks here is that your title or your axes can sometimes be, you know, key to this, right? So if, for example, your figure has titles on it, there we go. So Zoom is hiding this. If your figures have sort of titles on them already, so like new cases right here, I can sort of take off this, right? I can hide, I can edit this axis and I can take off too many cases because I've already said the cases here. So one of the things you want to do in design is you want to go through your visualization and say, where are there points of redundancy? Where have I already indicated something in another place such that I don't have to, you know, re-say it in another way, right? So I think that's one of the key things that you want to do. In addition to that, what you can do is you can add, for example, buttons and other features here that can be hyperlinked. So one of the things that you can do is you can insert hyperlinks and other features into your visualization, such as web pages or other things like that, that can take you to additional information, right? Say you want to shuttle somebody to something else, then you can easily have that feature that is there, right? So that's another way of sort of getting around having too much text. But you don't want to have so much text here. You know, 1 sentences, 2 sentences are oftentimes ideal. And just keep in mind that your viewers are going to be smart people, right? They're going to be able to kind of navigate your canvas and make decisions for themselves about certain things that they're seeing as well. So just keep that in mind. All right. Let's see here. If we go back so this is the total cases by country, and this is the last one we're going to do, and then I'm going to show some specific things. So total cases here, if you go to the format tab here in Tableau and you go to shading here, one of the things you can do here is you can change the background, right? And if you go back here, it's going to change the background. So one of the other things and tricks you may want to do in Tableau is have different colors that have different backgrounds to each of your visualizations in the pane level, right? So you see how this is worksheet right here. We can change that right here. And then we can go right here, worksheet right here. We can change this to match our background. Do you see that? So this is under format for each of these. So if we go to format here, we can change the background. And the funny thing about Tableau is that you have to change the background for all of these. You know, if you want to do this, you know, have a sort of a muted color back here, you need to sort of change it for each of these. So if we wanted to do that, that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to change this background here to our dominant background. So there we go. So now what we're seeing here is that everything is integrated. So the color background is starting to come in and it's starting to fade into one another. But you have to do that for each of these worksheets. That's the complicated thing with Tableau is think about these charts as integrated, but kind of separate, right? And so you can change the color, or you can make sure that you highlight a color. So let's use this sort of muted orange color that's sort of similar to our palette here. We can bring this out a little bit if this is a feature figure for us. All right. And I also want to hide this feature here. So let's go back to total cases, and we can tell it to hide this here. Let's remove this filter here. See what that did. So it's gonna screw up the figure. So that's one of the things that you want to make sure is that some of these features here are integral to how this looks. So you can always click the back button if you don't like it. So you can go forward and back using these two buttons right here. So we're going to keep that right there. And we're going to size this up a little bit. And we're going to sort of get it to this width right here. And then we're going to have total cases here. And we can decide where we want to put the title. So maybe we want to save text. We want to put the title right here and to say 3 waves. This is a great way of doing it. 3 waves of COVID-19 cases. And actually, I'm going to change back this to our main background here because I think it looks nice on sort of on a same sort of Tableau. So again, I'm going to just delete these ones. Let's just X out all of these. And we'll just see what we've got here as we sort of clean it. And I'm going to show you a couple of things here before we close. So again, we're beginning to kind of brand our data dashboard. And maybe you don't like the blue and the orange. That's sort of up to you. But the key thing is that we're beginning to sort of size things in a float mode that allows us to have a lot of flexibility here, right? So here we go. We're going to pinch in the text here because we want to have sort of 3 distinct panes here. That's what we're trying to go for in this design here. And then we want to move down this again, right, to make sure that everything is in alignment. All right. There we go. All right. So the other thing we may want to do as we sort of finish off this is we may want to add like the rhinoceros piece. We want to add pictures, but just notice this. The font looks really good. I love the font here, and we got lighter font. So we get the distinguishing between the text in there. But the other features we have here is website. So we can open a website. And so we can put in any sort of website here. So for example, if we have COVID-19 data, so I'm going to go, we're going to put in a website for COVID-19 data. So if we say COVID-19 case counts, we want to put that in here. And we're kind of doing this here. So if we go to a website that has COVID-19 case counts, we can do that. So we can copy and paste, for example, a website that does that. And then we can do that. We can have that piece. And this actually, what this does is this actually cuts and pastes that entire website in there. So we can embed the website. So if we want to embed a website into our visualization, we can do it in that way. So if we want to shrink down some sort of image and piece, we're not going to do that here. We're going to actually go back. Okay. So that's one of the other things we can do here. We also have an image. So we can drag in images and we can just link to an image that's online, or we can have an image that we want to choose. And one of the things that we want to do when we're looking at images, and this is a key thing, is we want to find images that are Creative Commons, right? That are images that we can use on our dashboards. Because one of the things to keep in mind is that our dashboards are public images. And we want to make sure that we're using images that we have license for. So here's some place that you can find them. If you're interested in knowing more places to find free images, one of the places right here that we like at Leaders of Africa for some of the things that we use stock, although we do a lot of our own photography, is Unsplashed. right? Or unsplashed, right? So it's got a lot of different images and things like that. And so you can download these images, you can search through them and download them with attribution. So you want to download them and you can upload the image and you can size the image to fit in your dashboard right here. Right. So that's another thing that you want to do is include images. So for those of you, Linda, for example, Florence, who are mentioning that you have interest in telling stories with the data, one of the things that I strongly suggest thinking about in that context is adding pictures of people who have been beneficiaries into your data dashboard, right? Don't be afraid to add photos into data dashboards. You know, we oftentimes think everything is about, for example, the data element, which it is to some degree, but you know, the pictures add things up. Again, I go back to that example that we saw on this example here of the rhinoceros, right? Remember this rhinoceros right here, where we click the button and it poached the rhinoceros and then you can't get back its tusk, right? That's all just a picture animation right there, right? So that's a key thing that we want to do, right? That's the intersection between design and this element, right? Thinking back to that one. All right, so the last couple of things, we have these menus here, and what we want to do is we want to float these. We want to float these pieces here, and hopefully they behave for me. I want to take off the image that we didn't upload here. Well, we can if we want to. I'll try and do that. So let's float this. And these are our filters, right? And our legends. So let's float this. Again, we're floating everything because that helps us move. So this legend, I'm going to move somewhere right here. So I'm going to put it in the figure and I'm going to find it and I'm going to nest it in a way that it sort of fits and it is integrated with the African continent, right? So the nice thing about the African continent is it has this sort of arc to it right here. So you oftentimes see the legend nestled in West Africa, Central Africa. And that looks kind of really nice. It's central. So, you know, the thing about if you put the legend too far away, say down here, you know, it's kind of off to the side, right? It's kind of off to the side. But one of the design features you oftentimes want to do is you want to nest things with one another. So if we even, you know, narrow down the map just a little bit, actually, let's keep it same size here. That's pretty good. Then we're able to kind of nestle it into the African continent there. So again, these are small things and it takes time, right? This is your sort of creative work, you know, your creative minds at work right here. So you can edit the title, we can edit the title of this, the new cases here, we can take off the title if we so choose. But again, what we have to do is ensure that the fonts are all in alignment with one another. That's one of the biggest mistakes we oftentimes have, right? So let's do this. Let's do new cases. That's pretty small. That's pretty big. So you have to go back here. And the thing is it doesn't allow us to apply it here. So that's why we have to keep going back and forth. So there we go. New cases there. So again, play around with it. Think about how things are geometrically spaced here. But let's go back to our filter here. And sometimes we want our filter to be in front and center because that's one of the features that we want people to kind of, you know, use and play around with here. And our filter right here needs a little bit of work here. It's very dim. You know, it's very, you know, hard to view here. So, you know, I'm going to bold it here and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger because I want to draw people's attention to the filter here. And I want to change the font to the Benton Sans again. So again, we're always doing it. Tableau has its own font. Don't use the Tableau font. Then your piece will look like just a good old Tableau piece. So we want to brand this. We're using the Benton. So let's go here. Let's take it down a little bit. And then I'm going to enlarge this a little bit here. So there's that. And I'm going to change the name here. I'm going to edit the filter here. And you know, because we want everything to kind of look really, really nice. Edit title. And again, I'm using all of this and I'm saying just country, because even though this is attached to Gapminder, which is the platform it's using, we just wanted to know what the country is. And then I want to bold the body here. The body is right here, the filter. I want to bold the body here and bring it up a little bit more to draw attention to it. And I want to change it to Benton. This takes a long time. I'm not going to lie. This takes a long time to design this. You're going to spend a whole day, you know, or more designing it. Now let's do a couple more things and then we'll close here. Right, there we go. I'm going to go like that, and that one will be in there. Right. So there we go. We have our country filter here, and then it's up near the top because that's where we want to do it. Because one of the cool things about this one is that this is, for example, one that you can filter. So if you go to Angola, there we go. It's going to start to filter all of the pieces. So if you have filters, one of the things that you want to do is you want to put them in a place that is easily viewable and is at the top, particularly if it's a filter that affects the entire visualization. Because here we go. Now we know that, you know, when you come to this visualization and you want to look up Ghana here, there we go. You see how the colors of the search bar are now the colors of our visualization. Everything's kind of got that branded feel. Then there we go. Here's Ghana. It's highlighted. It's got the cases. It's got the sort of the case count here, and it's all moving, and it's starting to sort of look really nice. And maybe we want to add an image of a COVID-19 vaccination clinic or something of that nature right here off to the side to sort of impress upon people to do this. So again, we can play around with the colors and features, but it's all about playing around with, you know, using these format pieces. So if you click on the triangle and you go to edit filter or edit format or floating, these are the key things that you want to make sure that you're doing as you're bringing things together. And the key thing that you're seeing here is that you want to be as consistent as possible, consistent with fonts, consistent with colors, consistent with sort of how you arrange the pieces here. So that's one thing that we've talked about. The second thing, which is a stylistic point that I believe Linda or Florence mentioned earlier at our session, is it's about telling stories about people, right? Oftentimes when we're doing this. And one of the things you want to arrange in your dashboard is think about it, arranging it from, you know, your macro to your micro, right? Like some sort of flow. So either from micro or to macro or from macro to micro. So for example, if I'm looking at it right here, like this is the continent of Africa. Let's do this right here. This is the continent map. So this is what we would say is a macro view, right? And then we get into a micro view. We start getting into the continent, then it's countries, and then it's individual country that I want to highlight. Right. So one of the design features you want to do is you want to start like you want to start your visualization where people are zoomed out and then they're zooming in. Right. And so for those of you who are looking at making impact dashboards that want to make you focus on individual beneficiaries or individual projects, you want to start with the sort of the overarching numbers, and then you want to bring it down to that piece. And so, and then that way, when you're looking at your dashboard, if you're reading it, in this case, we're kind of reading it like this. See how we're doing this? We're snaking around. We're sort of reading it like this. That is a way in which we sort of tell a story through our numbers, right? That's a way that we begin to tell a story. Or we could start with a case and then snake it around like this. Or we could have horizontal lines where we got sort of one block here and then one block here, right? So if I were to block this out here, we could have maybe one part of the story here, the macro here, and then the, you know, delving into it down here, right? Whereas this one is arranged based on columns here, something like this, you know, and reading down like that, right? So the point here is you want to play around with this, because data dashboards and the creation of them are so competitive these days. So let's go back. I want to go back to our original one. Go to mouse here. The examples here. So look at this. This is a simple data dashboard that we looked at. This is the one we started today's session with, right? When we began. Very simple. It's really only got one piece of data in this entire thing, and that is this, right? And the map, right? The map doesn't even tell us anything. And all it's doing is it's drawing lines and annotating, which we can do. So if we go back to here, and we view this, we can also annotate. So do you see this? We can mark the point. We can add points. So we can add a marker label. So let me say, for example, let's mark this. We could say country, and then this is what it's going to do. So what I'm doing is adding a label here. So, and there we go. Annotate. That all I'm doing is side clicking on a country and clicking annotate mark. So we can do things like that if we're focused on a given country. There we go. And it's taking the background from the previous one. So we can do that. And that's all this one is doing, right? This fancy visualization is just using an image, a figure, a map, and an annotation in creative colors, right? But it does it in a very visually pleasing way, right? And it composes that. And if we had unlimited time today, we take our little mini dashboard and we really make it beautiful like this. But that takes time, right? That takes time. Or this one. Take a look at this one. This one is very simple. It's just a bunch of little country figures here that are all linked together. And then it's got these sort of beautiful text elements that are there, right? It's adding backings to each of the text, right? It's simply going here, you know, and changing the format of the text object, right? And allowing it to have that background as part of this text, right? So, and we can do that in different places, right? The format tab helps us do with some of those pieces. All right. Oh, getting out of here. All right. So again, looks complicated, but it's about the simple design elements here. Or in this one's even simpler than the rest. This is just two bar graphs, a line graph or area graph. It's hard to tell here because there are so many points. It's by the day. And then an Africa map. Graded in the color, nice like black background, right? So this is the thing. It takes a lot of time. And as I started today's session and as we close, one of the things that we notice, and I mentioned at the beginning, is that all of us come to data visualization from different perspectives. Some of us are the developers, right? We do development, right? Stuff. We do coding. And then some of us are data analysts. So we're thinking about data. And then some of us are the designers. And when you have to be all three people, the developer, the data analyst, and the designer, you have to put some emphasis on that design element, right? And that's the critical thing that hopefully this session has made you sort of think about and play around with. But play around with Tableau. It's really fun. It's very flexible. You have all of these, ability to access all of these different features and do something and create something that's beautiful, right? That really speaks to the audience and how you want to engage them, right? Because there's so many great visualizations these days, and you want your visualizations to really, really come out and pop quite a lot. All right, so at this time, before we close out the session, I want to take any questions that you have. So you can either raise your hand if you have questions that you want to share out your voice, or you can simply share in the chat a question for me, and I will talk about how you do that. Because there may be some things that you say, oh, I wish I had covered this single topic, right? We've been really focused on sort of changing around the colors, right? So taking this, changing the fonts of the figures. So if we wanted to change the fonts of the figures, for example, this is how you do it for all of them. So this is, we do this. There, we're going to change our Benton Sands, and then we change the color of our font here. We can change that all in the different workbooks, or we can change it in the dashboard. You see how now the fonts match here? So there we go. Well, we can go on and on and on, but if there are any questions or comments, please put those in the chat and I can help out with that. But if not, I'll wait just a minute before closing out the session. All right. Just giving everyone a minute. And while you're doing that, if you are interested in learning more at the Leaders of Africa Institute, and some of us have been to our sessions, connect with us. Simply share your email address with us. There are a lot of different learning opportunities that are present at the Leaders of Africa Institute. In fact, we have an entire course that lasts 2 months on data visualization, right? It's a 2-month course. It's about 3 hours of a week of course training. In addition to that, you have assignments every week that get graded and shared in feedback. And then you have weeks of individual mentorship. So you work on their data dashboard with a professor who specializes in a similar area and develops that. And that's the way our institute works. It's very hands-on. It's very intense. I'll say it is a very intense project and sort of phase. And our up and coming showcase of visualizations is coming in early December. So if you join the mailing list, you'll certainly get an opportunity to see what our current visualization scholars have done over the last months, starting in September, and that will be in early December. So I encourage you to use the link in the chat to join with us and connect with us. It's a great way to learn about some of the programming that's there and opportunities as well. And again, we do work in research, data visualization, data analytics, as well as tech development as well, particularly in the education space. That's what we focus on, as well as the broader international development space. So seeing no questions or comments, I'm going to close out today's session, but I will stay on in case any of you want to have some informal conversations sort of offline. I'll stay on here, but I just want to encourage you to bring design into your visualizations. Think about the colors. Think about the fonts. Think about how you arrange things. Think about how that is perceived by your audience. Don't just let Tableau dictate the design elements. Get in control of those design elements and take your time to play around with them and learn new features. There's so much to learn, right? We've just covered some things in our 2-hour session here. We could go on and on and on about the different ways in which we kind of bring new things out in our data dashboards. So I want to encourage you to think about those topics and also use this opportunity to engage broader audiences with your visualization. So that's all we have for today. Thanks for joining me. Again, I'm Professor Peter Penar, and I'm just happy to join you with you today for today's session. So take care and bye-bye. And again, if you want me to show anything, I'm going to stop the recording now, but you can stay on and we can discuss any issues.